If you have an agency that's coming to you and telling you without knowing anything of your financial structure that they can promise you these results in a certain amount of time, that's actually a red flag. So look for agencies that are asking you the tough questions.
Hello everyone, my name is Francois, and you might know me through my blog or my articles, but today we're doing something a little different. Today I am with Abby Schommer, Chief Customer Officer at Red Science, and today Abby will tell us everything we need to know about how small and medium businesses should work with marketing agencies. Abby, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting me to the conversation. That's quite the intro. Big shoes to fill, letting everybody know everything they need to know about marketing agencies. I'll do my best.
Of course. But before we start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you do right now, your background, and how you got in the field?
Yeah, so I'm Abby. Like you mentioned, I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Rev Science. And I came to Rev Science because, and this is why it's kind of appropriate to chat all things marketing agencies, I actually come from an advertising background. So I worked at a series of different ad tech startups early in my career, working with direct response marketers to help them automate and optimize their marketing buys. After that, I went over to Facebook and actually worked platform side for a number of years. And then when I was at Facebook, iOS 14 happened. So we had a big bout of this measurement reckoning. The way that advertisers were quantifying the impact of their marketing previously just wasn't sufficient anymore. So I started working with a lot of marketing mix modeling companies actually during my time at Facebook. And that's how I got introduced to my co founder now. I actually went to go work at his media mix modeling company. And thereafter, we decided we wanted to go on and start solving data driven challenges for customers, but not just the biggest customers in the world, actually small to medium businesses as well. We realized there was a lot lacking in their data visibility and kind of the data they were equipping themselves with when making not just marketing decisions, but all decisions related to their business. So that's how Rev Science came to be, and a bit of how my background informed that.
That sounds great. So let's get started. And yeah, you mentioned small and medium businesses, and I think that's very important. I think it's very interesting, and I'm more interested in these smaller businesses than the large companies. So let's say I work for a small business and small to medium business, and I'm currently doing my marketing in-house. So how do I know if I start, looking for a marketing agency or if I start looking for a partner? What should be my criteria?
Yeah, completely. I think even taking it a step back further, I think there's certain questions that business owners need to be asking themselves before they start running paid marketing at all, whether that's something they're outsourcing to an agency or something they're choosing to do in-house. Because I think a big misnomer out there is that paid marketing will kind of address other challenges of your business. If you're not a profitable business, paid marketing can get you to a point of profitability. Whereas the reality there is there's many instances where running paid ads could actually accelerate your losses, not your profits. So one of the things I always challenge small to medium and even large business customers to do is to look at their contribution margin. And that should really be your litmus test for understanding how you can be spending on marketing, if at all. So your contribution margin, for anybody who doesn't know, is in essence your revenue net all of the variable expenses associated with delivering that revenue or making a sale for an e-commerce business. So that's things like your unit costs or COGS, but it's everything else as well. It's processing fees for payment options, it's shipping, basically everything that goes into getting that product sold to your ideal customer. And then, you want to look at all of those variable expenses relative to the revenue you're making on producing a sale and see if there's room to spare. If there's not room to spare, then adding paid marketing to the equation will just make you less profitable, right? Your variable expenses will start to further outweigh the revenue you're making from each sale. So that's kind of a foundational thing that business owners should be looking at. And you should really have a healthy contribution margin before you start to introduce marketing because your marketing dollars will also take you so much further. because once you do have a healthy contribution margin and something that also allows for a little additional variable expense in the form of paid ads, then running paid ads will accelerate your profits, or it will accelerate how much money you're making on each sale. So if you have additional fixed costs, scaling marketing can start to overcome that fixed cost, and it will get you closer to a place of profitability or grow your profitability. So that's something I really implore business owners to look at. If they're not running paid marketing at all, do they have room to run paid marketing and add to their variable expense? If so, great. And then I think, to your question too, if that is the case, how do you know whether to go with an agency or do it in house? I do implore a lot of business owners, if you can, to do it in house. I understand that for some folks, they don't have the resourcing internally, or they feel that they don't have the expertise. So I think if you are at a place where you feel like you've really maxed out your ability to run paid marketing effectively in house, you're lacking some of the skills. And those skills do include ad creative, because especially in this day and age, ad creative is really the recipe for success with paid marketing. Then you can look to an agency, in so long as your contribution margin again allows for that additional buffer, right? Because you're not just going to be spending money on paid ads, you're going to be spending money on agency fees, potentially both variable and fixed. So just make sure you have that extra cushion, and make sure the agency you're going with can kind of supplement what you're not able to do in house.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And I think if there's no budget for any kind of advertising, that's a completely different issue. But let's say I have the budget to advertise, but I don't have the team in-house to do it. And I'm looking for an agency. And we know there's a million agencies out there. So how do I find one, and how do I make sure I choose the right one?
Yeah, it's funny because I laugh when people ask this question, because e-commerce business owners will empathize. If you have a social presence at all, you probably already have agencies reaching out to you left and
Mhm.
right, flooding your
Yeah.
Instagram DMs, wanting to run marketing for you. So it's really important that you do go in with a level of intention. You do have very set criteria, because if you just say yes to the first person who reaches out, it's not always going to be the best fit. So in so much as you're looking to vet different marketing agencies, I do have a set of criteria. The first of which is, always be looking for an agency that's, quite honestly, asking you just as many, if not more, questions than you're asking them. You want agencies that are asking you the tough questions about your own business's operating model, and ideally your business's financials. I know a lot of e-commerce business owners might think, oh, that feels really invasive. But to be fair, like what I mentioned earlier, if an agency doesn't have a purview into your unit economics, again, that contribution margin, they don't know how much room they have to play with variable acquisition costs. They don't know the type of returns they need to be getting with marketing in order to make your business profitable. And there's actually no way they can know at any point in time when it is profitable to scale their existing advertising efforts. So, them asking you those questions is really in your best interest. If you have an agency that's coming to you and telling you, without knowing anything of your financial structure, that they can promise you these results in a certain amount of time, that's actually a red flag. So look for agencies that are asking you the tough questions. And even better yet, if they're asking you questions you don't know the answer to yet, then you can go back and make sure you're really airtight on your contribution margin, so you can both be operating with that in mind in the partnership. So that's number one. Number two, ideally, I love agencies that treat, and you want to be looking out for agencies that treat the partnership almost like they are your portfolio manager. I've heard agency owners talk about this before, as though they're like a fiduciary to their clients. And I love that terminology, because much like a fiduciary or portfolio manager of your financials, a marketing agency should be looking at your entire marketing portfolio. Ideally, they should be wanting to influence as much of that portfolio as possible, because if they can see and influence what's happening, not just on Facebook, but with your Google ad buys and maybe your Amazon ad buys, and they know what's happening from a branding perspective as well, then they can observe the interaction effects between what's happening on those different channels, and basically themselves optimize the media mix and kind of the share of channel spend in a way that best benefits your top line profitability. Agencies who only work on one channel, who are operating in a silo, they really don't have an understanding of if a performance is changing on a certain channel, is that because maybe spend went up on another channel? Things like that. It's not reasonable to think that every single agency, though, can run all of your marketing. So, to the extent they can't do everything, look for an agency that wants to stay privy to your activity on other channels. Again, this might feel invasive, like, oh, why is this agency trying to scope creep and maybe try to find out what we're doing with other agencies? In earnest, it is in your best interest for them to know if you're advertising elsewhere and how spend on other channels is going up and down, so they can kind of discern, oh, this might be related to why we're seeing the performance fluctuations we are on our end. So that's number 2. I love agencies that treat their jobs as being portfolio managers. A continuation of that is I also love agencies who don't just try to look multi-channel, but they look throughout the entire customer journey. So they want to influence not just what's happening on multiple channels, but what's happening once someone who sees an ad lands on your website, because you could be driving cost per sessions that are really efficient, but if by the time you get to the website your CVR is really poor, that's going to totally offset all the great marketing work you've done. So agencies who want to have a firm grasp on what's happening in the customer experience post, marketing impression, that's just going to be to everybody's benefit. So there's a lot of really great agencies who do things like landing page customization. They also do website CRO services. So agencies who are thinking beyond just the ads experience are really, really great as well. And then the last thing I'll land on is, and I'm pretty outspoken about this, and Rev Sciences as well, like one of our core pillars of our analytics platform is we don't ingest any attribution, any attributed results. For those who aren't quite clear on attribution, attribution is, you'll see it if you go into Facebook or Google when it's Facebook or Google's own reported metrics. You'll also see it with a third-party attribution provider like Triple Whale if you're using their Pixel. Um, Basically, attribution is an attempt to credit one channel campaign ad with the impact to a customer's revenue and kind of isolate that impact to that one channel, one campaign, one ad. But the reality is, what we know to be true of the customer experience and the customer journey is you can never singularly credit one channel with anything. So if an agency only looks to attribution to quantify the impact of what they're producing as an agency on a channel campaign, that signals to me that they're not really honoring the nuance of the customer experience. So I love to work with agencies who they don't need to throw all attribution out the door because it does still serve its place in certain capacities. But um, I prefer an agency that acknowledges the limitations of attribution and doesn't just use attribution to make marketing decisions on your behalf.
Yeah, I see, but hold on. If they're not using attribution to measure performance, like you need to measure performance, so what they use?
Yeah, it's a very fair point. Um, and this is again, this is sometimes uncomfortable because you would love to kind of single-handedly understand what each part of the portfolio is contributing. But like I mentioned, that really ignores the nuance of the customer journey. It also ignores the fact that a lot of customers who are going to purchase and be attributed to your ad or your campaign probably would have purchased anyway. I mean, we've all had this experience of searching something on Google because I know that I need to re-up the dog food that I'm low on. And I type in the name of that dog food provider in Google search. And then the first thing that pops up is the dog food brand that I usually buy from. I don't even realize that that listing is a sponsored listing, it's a promoted listing, but I buy from it. As far as Google's concerned, they are crediting themselves with driving that purchase, the Google ads, that is, even though I was on my way to buy it anyway. So this is like the whole notion of incrementality as well. Like attribution is blind to the incremental impact of each channel beyond just organic baseline intent. So really the only way to truly understand whether marketing is advancing your goals is to look at what sometimes we call canonical conversions, like conversions that are just irrefutable, verifiable business results. And where you're going to get those is in your back end. So if you're an e-commerce store owner, these are going to be your Shopify conversions. If you're using another e-commerce platform, it's going to be your actual order data in your back end. And what you want to do is you basically want to take a blended approach and you want to say, what is all of my top line revenue, my canonical top line revenue from my back end relative to all of my marketing spend. And that ratio is called MER, it's marketing efficiency ratio. And this is also why it's really great if you have one agency owning as many channels as possible, because then that MER number is going to be so much more of a representation of what they can influence because they're influencing all of your marketing. That MER number will tell you, what is the ratio of your top line revenue relative to how much you're spending on marketing. And what that number can also tell you is to the extent that it improves, marketing's advancing your goals in a more efficient manner. It's just irrefutable. So a lot of the great agencies that I look out for are ones that operate with MER goals. Sometimes you'll hear it called a blended ROAS goal, but that's not to be confused with platform level attributed ROAS. You want blended across all revenue, all marketing.
Yeah, and just to go back on something you said it's better to work with an agency that has expertise in multiple channels. What I hear when I get emails from marketers is we are an expert at Google pay-per-click or Amazon or whatever, and that's all we do all day, every day. And some people may think, oh, okay, maybe working with a dedicated expert is better. Um, but you're basically saying no, it's better to work with someone with a broader range of skills. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's of course on a case by case basis. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like an agency can be the best at everything. Like that doesn't exist. What is the reality is a lot of these platforms, they're starting to operate a lot more similarly. When I was, before I joined Facebook, and then once I was at Facebook, I mean, it got to the point where some of our Facebook products were like, and this is even speaking from people who don't work at Facebook. Like, I don't want this to be like a Facebook like point of view. This is just everybody sees it, right? Like the PMAX campaigns look a lot like the Advantage Plus campaigns, right? And like we're all a lot of these ads channels are moving in the direction of kind of more automation, more consolidation, more creative is targeting, right? And like creative is the best way to, while still having a level of liquidity in your campaigns and allowing the auction to kind of like do its thing and find your best user, creative is the best way to equip Google and Facebook and TikTok with, and other platforms with kind of an ad unit that they surmise will best meet the needs of the ideal customer. Like if I'm running an ad unit that has a millennial woman in it, it's all the more likely the platforms are smart enough to deliver that to a millennial woman, right? Well, you'll see it all the time in like a Facebook Advantage Plus campaign. Even if you do broad gender targeting, if it's a makeup ad, a lot of the conversions are going to go to female audience. So, and this is true again. This is kind of the direction a lot of these ad platforms are heading in. So I feel like whereas previously specialization, it channel specific was very important. Now things are starting to, there's some synergies across platforms. Um, Another reason that I do love agencies who do more than one, and I know we're going to talk about pricing too, is a lot of the ways agencies price themselves are if you funnel more spend through their agency, you'll basically get a tiered discount on percent of managed spend. So the more you spend with an agency, the more of a deal you're going to get on how much they're going to charge you if they're doing a managed fee. So that's another reason why I'm a little biased. I'm not going to lie, I have customers who use an Amazon agency for Amazon and they use a paid social agency for Google and Facebook. And I think that can absolutely work. But again, and I've seen this with the great agency before as well that we work with, they just stay privy to what's happening on Amazon. Like this one agency doesn't specialize in Amazon, they're more Facebook and Google, but they have a tracker so that they can understand how Amazon spend is going up and down so they can kind of surmise the interaction effects between those channels. That's the idea if you can't get one agency that does everything.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to pricing, as you say, pricing, there's many models, and it's very important for small businesses. So, how do agencies typically structure their fees and costs? And as a small or medium business, how much can I expect to spend?
Yeah, completely. So, as a small to medium business, what I typically recommend is so there's two different ways that an agency generally charges a monthly retainer, which is a fixed amount every month, all in, or they do that managed fee model that I talked about, which is basically they charge you a percentage of all of the spend that they're running through their agency. And typically with a managed fee, the more you spend, there's like a fish like economies of scale. Like the more you spend, the more on that incremental spend number you get a lower fee. So you're incentivized to spend more with the agency, of course. I think what it really comes down to is what we talked about earlier in the conversation, which is does that agency have visibility into your contribution margin? Because again, if they don't know your unit economics, they have no idea at what point it is profitable to your business for them to scale existing marketing efforts. If you spend more across channels when you have a negative contribution margin, you're going to incur losses. You're going to degrade your profitability. And so it's really important that an agency stay clues into that number really real time. And one thing I'll say too is a lot of times it's hard because your gross margin and how much it costs to sell the products and how much you paid for those products. Sometimes it's easy to do like a peanut butter. Oh, our general gross margin is this, but that changes drastically based on the products you're actually selling. Some of your products you're selling, you might be selling at a full markup. Some of the products you're selling, you might be selling at a discount. So having a real-time understanding into the actual realized COGS of the products that are being sold through marketing is also really important. So if you have an agency that does not have that visibility, which not all of them will, I do tend to say a retainer can be a safer bet just because it's really risky to have an agency kind of like scaling spend up and down without any purview into your unit economics. If they do have a purview, real time understanding of the unit economics and are kind of operating with that contribution margin in mind, I think the managed fee model can be great. And then again, what you can do is once you see that scaling ad spend with this agency is profitable, you can spend more, get more of a percentage discount on that managed fee. You can also choose to put more channels through that agency. So yeah, I think if the trust is really there too, like data visibility and trust, I do feel like customers are incented more to go the managed fee route. But if you're lacking that visibility and trust, the retainer might be a better option in the early days.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would trust an agency who would never ask me about my financials and my margins. I don't know how they would work efficiently. Do you see any other red flags I should look for when choosing an agency?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's the inverse of the criteria I shared earlier. Like those were green flags, the red flags would be the opposite. So I think agencies who don't, like you said, like you just said, if they don't ask you any questions about your financials or your business, that's a red flag. And while it's very intuitive to you, Francois, it doesn't happen enough. Like I've worked with a lot of agencies. I've worked at agencies. It's not the status quo, and it needs to be. So that's number one. If they're not asking you questions, if they're just giving you case study numbers or telling you, and it's hard because I feel like a lot of businesses will pine for the answer of what do you think you can drive for my business? What type of marketing returns do you expect based on what you've produced for other customers? It's very tempting to get that answer. If you get that answer before they ask you any questions about your business, it's it's really not any indication of what they're going to be able to achieve for you. So steer clear of agencies that promise you results without asking any questions about your business and your financials. Try to not work with an agency that is very singularly focused on just one channel. Because honestly, that could just get really expensive for you having a bunch of different agencies you're working with who each have their own retainer and each have their own managed fees. Um, Also, work with an agency who's looking at everything. Even if they're only managing Facebook, if they just have some type of curiosity behind they're looking at your website. Maybe they're providing you some recommendations, some like light consulting, something or other because from an agency standpoint, that's just going to benefit their returns. I know agencies who won't work with a customer before they get their CVR up to a certain percentage on the website. So that's, if they're not asking questions about the rest of the customer experience, the website experience, probably look the other way. And my biggest one again is that attribution. If all they can tell you is attributed results they've driven on a platform, if you ask them, I think a really telling question to ask agencies is, how do you handle attribution? Like, how do you overcome the limitations of attribution? That answer to that question is going to be really telling. That answer to that question is also going to illuminate to you whether or not they know what attribution fully is. I've had agencies who don't really understand why the attributed numbers will diverge so much from the Shopify backend results. So vet for some of that information, and some of the answers they give you might be red flags that make you also want to run in the other direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, very, very good advice, especially if an agency cannot explain what attribution is. That's a little scary. But thank you so much. Do you have any more advice or anything else small businesses should know?
Yeah, I think just a couple last minute things because I have worked with a number of small businesses. It's really tempting to, when you're small, kind of look at, the biggest brands in the world that you aspire to be one day and kind of look up to your heroes. Or even if they aren't big publicly traded companies, look at other brands that look like they're killing it on social media, like capturing all this market share. Be very careful with modeling your own growth strategies after those types of companies because you have no understanding of their profitability just by looking at their social media growth, and some of these vanity metrics. You have no idea if they're running their business profitably. So I've had customers who, want to spend crazy amounts of money on photography or videography because some of the biggest brands in the world are producing these amazing videos. But if that's just going to degrade your net profitability, maybe that's not the right choice for you right now. So just be wary of who you're modeling your strategies after. And rather than looking to everybody else, look to your own financial metrics as a barometer of what's achievable and viable at this point in time for your business. So that's kind of like some sobering advice. And then to just kind of offset that, I think it's really exciting to be in the really early stages of building your business, especially as an e-commerce business. Take advantage of this time in the early days. When you're small, you can test and learn a lot of things and introduce a lot of variance into your strategies without causing major disruption. You're not spending crazy amounts yet. You don't have a really bureaucratic internal setup. Like you can go and if one day you want to just decrease your Facebook budget by 20% to see what happens to your back end revenue, do it, right? Like you don't have to answer to anybody about it. And introducing variants like that, especially when it comes to marketing, it's going to be very telling. Because if you decrease Facebook spend by 20% and nothing happens to your sale volume, what does that tell you about the efficacy of your Facebook marketing, right? And that's not to say you should turn off Facebook, but maybe there's other things you should be doing on Facebook to make sure that it's driving that impact to your back end revenue. So take advantage of this time, like experiment, learn, especially when it's a bit lower stakes in the early days. And then those learnings will serve you really well as you continue to grow your business.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And as you said, having a business can be really exciting, but I think it can be a little overwhelming, and it can be very tempting to print, business card that say CEO rather than looking at your margins or starting generating sales. But yeah, very, very good advice. Thank you so much for your time, Ivy. And thank you to everyone who listened to this interview. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And if you would like to see more of these, please let me know. But thank you so much, Abby. That was really, really helpful.
Yeah, thanks for the great probing questions. These are the questions people need to be asking. And yeah, thanks for bringing visibility to these matters and a lot of the other things you raise awareness around on your website and your blog. I'm a big fan, a big subscriber of all of your content.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So thank you, Abby. Thank you, everyone. And have a good rest of your week.